Homeless man, Franklin Delaney, jailed for stealing bread. The entire courtroom went silent. The judge suddenly stood, up, his eyes trembling. No one understood what was happening. But he did. The handcuffed man standing before him was a veteran, a soldier who had once saved his life on a battlefield nearly 20 years ago. This wasn't just a case. It was part of the veteran stories society has long ignored. And at Justice for Veterans, we tell these stories so that you never look at a soldier with indifference again. His name is Franklin Delaney, a Marine Corps sergeant. Over 20 years of service. He served in Iraq, Afghanistan, yet now he lives in a scrapped van behind a Brooklyn landfill. No money, no benefits, no one beside him. After his wife, Eleanor, passed away from a misdiagnosed cancer, Frank fell apart. He lost faith in the hospitals, the government, and in himself. Every night, he curls up under a rain-soaked blanket. Each morning, he pushes a cart to collect Canson memories that others have discarded. They call him Crazy Delaney, but no one knows. He once saved dozens of lives. That day in New York, it was -3 degrees. Frank hadn't eaten in 2 days. He stood outside Morelli's bakery, eyes peering through the fogged glass. A stale loaf, still unsold. Without hesitation, he pushed the door open, his hands trembling. He reached into the basket and slipped the loaf into his coat. But before he could leave, a clerk shouted, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Frank stopped, didn't run, didn't resist. He simply opened his coat, held out the bread and said, "I just need enough strength to live one more day." The police came. They handcuffed him like a criminal. No one asked why. No one cared who he was. But what they didn't know was that this arrest was about to change the system. The next morning, Frank appeared at the Brooklyn District Court, torn coat, messy hair, hands cuffed in front of him. A public defender stood by his side, never looking at him once. The case was considered minor, scheduled to be resolved in 5 minutes. The judge entered. His name, Harold Whitmore, known for being strict and by the book. He sat down, opened the case file, flipped the first page, and read aloud, "Defendant name, Franklin Edward Delaney." The room went silent. Harold looked up. His eyes widened. He placed his hand on the bench and slowly stood up. Staring at the man before him, eyes he had once seen in a war zone, he said nothing, just stood still. A moment so strange it gave everyone chills, because the man in handcuffs was the same soldier who once carried him across the line between life and death. After court was temporarily adjourned, Judge Whitmore returned to his office. He couldn't take his eyes off the name, Franklin Delaney. 19 years ago, Fallujah, Iraq. A Humvee struck a landmine. Smoke, blood, screams. Heaven, a combat medic was badly injured, unable to move. Bullets zipped overhead, and then someone dragged him out of the burning vehicle. A young soldier, shoulder torn open, carried him 2 miles through hell. That man was Frank. Whitmore pulled up the military records. Line by line, Sergeant Franklin Delaney, heroic action, saved 17 soldiers. Fallujah, 2003. And a photo. Frank holding a wounded Afghan girl in a burning village. He paused, placed his hand on the image, closed his eyes. He had just realized the man in cuffs yesterday was the reason he was still alive today. That night, Judge Whitmore didn't sleep. He sat alone in his office, staring at the computer, typed into the military database, Franklin Delaney, Sergeant, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marine Regiment. Achievements: saved 17 lives across 3 operations. Awarded Bronze Star for Valor. The photo of him holding the Afghan girl once featured on the cover of Time magazine in 2004. But then he found something strange. Frank's benefits record had been terminated in 2008. Reason: incorrect social security number. Record mismatch. Which meant Frank had lost his pension, insurance, and all aid. For nearly 15 years, no one noticed. No one corrected it. Whitmore slammed his hand on the desk, fell silent. The system killed him, without firing a bullet. The courtroom was no longer empty. The press arrived. Live broadcast. Veterans in uniform sat in the front row. Frank walked in. Same old coat, but his eyes were different. No longer lost, just waiting. Judge Whitmore sat still for a moment, then spoke. I summon a special witness, a man who once commanded the defendant in the military. The doors opened. A tall man entered, wearing full dress uniform adorned with medals. I am Colonel Richard Halstead. I'm here to tell the truth about that man. Frank looked up. Their eyes met. No words needed. Halstead turned to the jury. If not for him, ye and 16 others wouldn't be here today. I stand before you now, because Frank Delaney walked through hell on our behalf. The courtroom fell silent. Colonel Halstead stepped to the stand, holding a worn-out folder. He pointed to a page. This is a certified military record. Frank completed 9 combat operations, saving many lives, including mine. He paused, choked up. And this is a document from 2008 confirming the clerical error. One wrong digit in his social security number cost him everything. Gasps filled the room. A prosecutor stood and nodded. We withdraw all charges. Judge Whitmore looked up, voice steady. Franklin Delaney is not a criminal. He is a victim of neglect. The gavel struck. The court declares unconditional release. Everyone rose. Applause thundered. Frank remained still. But for the first time, his eyes welled with tears. After the trial, Frank stepped out onto the courthouse steps. Cold wind brushed through his silver hair, and he raised a hand to shield his eyes from the sun. From the crowd in the distance, a trembling yet tender voice called out, Uncle Frank, is it really you? Frank turned around. A young woman was running toward him. Tears spilled as she threw her arms around him. It's me, Emily, Eleanor's niece, your wife's. He froze. His whole body stiffened. The girl opened her wallet and pulled out an old photo, a picture of 3 people, Eleanor, little Emily, and Frank in uniform. My mom kept this every year. Every Christmas, she lit a candle waiting for word from you. Frank couldn't speak. His lips trembled slightly. Then gently, he placed a hand on Emily's head. After years of living like a ghost, he was called by a name he thought had vanished forever. Uncle. Frank Delaney's story spread across every major news outlet. Forgotten veteran, the hero who once saved a judge's life. Headlines flooded the media. Public outrage followed. The community was moved. A GoFundMe page was launched within just 3 days. It raised over 200,000. Online, people shared the story with hashtags, Justice for Frank, Forgotten Hero. The federal VA department made a public announcement. We will conduct a nationwide investigation into benefit losses due to administrative errors. In Brooklyn, a group of pro bono lawyers established a legal fund called the Delaney Initiative, free legal support for homeless veterans. A viral video spread online. Frank standing before the court, silver-haired, humble eyes, giving a small wave, and the caption appeared, A hero doesn't need armor, just a chance to be heard. In an elementary classroom in Queens, New York, a 10-year-old boy named Noah Simmons submitted an essay titled, Who is Your Hero? Just 2 pages long, but it moved the entire review board to tears. Noah recounted seeing a ragged old man collecting cans outside the grocery store. He asked his mother why the man looked so sad. She shook her head. Don't look at him, he's dangerous. But later, when he saw Frank Delaney on television, Noah realized that was him. The man picking up cans was a real hero. In his closing, Noah wrote, Not everyone wearing torn clothes is bad. Some are wearing the weight of their memories. Frank received a copy of the essay by mail. He read it slowly, then folded the paper and wept. Not out of sorrow, but because, for the first time in years, he felt understood. Frank Delaney now lives in a small home at Veterans Village. The room is simple. Gray walls, a wooden bed, a bookshelf, and a window overlooking a maple tree-lined yard. On his desk, he keeps only two things: a photo of his wife and a fresh loaf of bread, replaced daily. He doesn't hang medals. He declines interviews. When a TV network offered to make a film about him, Frank simply shook his head. "I don't need to be remembered by face. I just hope the next ones won't be forgotten by name." Each morning, he waters the plants. Each evening, he writes in his journal, documenting the names of fallen comrades. Every night, before switching off the light, he places his hand on the bread and whispers, "Thank you for another day alive." Frank's life is peaceful now, but in his eyes, there still burns one quiet truth. Honor doesn't need applause, just silence, deep enough. At Fort Hamilton, a special ceremony was held for the first time to honor a veteran once forgotten. The hall fell silent as Frank entered, wearing the old uniform he had carefully ironed the night before. On the newly mounted brass plaque was an engraving of a soldier carrying a comrade through fire, and beneath it, the words, "Franklin Delaney, the man who carried the whole team home and never stopped walking." When his name was called to receive the restored honor medal, Frank walked slowly, no bowing, no tears. He simply stood tall and saluted the flag. Judge Whitmore, standing below, raised his hand in return, not as a judge, but as a man who had once been saved by him. No one said a word, but everyone in the room understood. That day, honor wasn't awarded, it was restored. On Veterans Day, at a small park event in Brooklyn, Frank Delaney stepped up onto a temporary wooden platform. In front of him were faces of all ages: civilians, veterans, and children. He brought no speech, only held his old military cap, faded, dented. He looked up, his voice low, steady, full of weight. "I once protected this country with my hands. Today, this country has protected me with a kind heart." He paused for a few seconds, all eyes fixed on him. "I don't resent being forgotten. I'm just grateful someone finally remembered." He looked toward the front row where Emily, Judge Whitmore, and young Noah sat. Kindness is never too late. It just needs someone patient enough to listen. No one clapped right away, because emotions don't need sound. Only nods, silent tears, and a soft breeze blowing through the old cap he held close. Frank Delaney found his peace. But this story is not just about Frank. It's about countless other Nemes sleeping on benches, fading into America's background. Men and women who didn't fight for fame, but so we could live in peace. They don't need pity. They need justice. And if we stay silent in the face of their erasure, we're no better than those who abandoned them. At Justice for Veterans, we don't tell stories to stir emotions. We tell them so that no one like Frank ever has to fight alone for dignity again. If you've ever passed a homeless veteran, don't just see the worn coat. Look closer, because behind that faded fabric might be the person who once kept you safe. Share this story. Subscribe to Justice for Veterans. And if you know a Frank in real life, leave their name in the comments. Because this time, we won't let anyone be forgotten.